Dear ESFJ, actually, never mind. I'll just talk to you over a video chat. Sincerely, ISTP. All right, and welcome to another MBTI type interaction. I'm Celebok, I'm an ISTP, and this is the long-awaited chat with an ESFJ. I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's RD93 from Personality Cafe.
Hello.
It's good to have you here, and yeah, I'm really excited. This is my first interaction with an ESFJ, or at least an ESFJ who's into MBTI and typology, and I mean, people who have watched my channel are kind of familiar with the ESFJ experiences I've had in my life, and we can probably kind of get into those if that's. We'll just kind of see how that goes. We don't. Neither of us really have anything specific in mind that we planned. We're just kind of how most of these interactions go. So,
Can I ask how many ESFJs do you have in your life exactly?
That I know of, I've counted, I think, at least four, maybe four or five. And I'm sure there are plenty of others. Because I know ESFJ is a fairly common female type. Is it the most common, or is it the second most common?
Oh, okay. That's something I would like to talk about is the MBTI statistics, which I want to combat them mostly because people claim that ESFJs are a very common type, and being one myself, I would know them when I see them. And I actually don't come across them very often at all. I can name maybe 3 ESFJs I've come across in the last year or two. I've seen many more NFs than I've seen SFJs even. And I mean, even in popular culture and film and video and that kind of thing, I don't see that many. Maybe that's because of the topic area. But okay, so this is a little bit of a tangent, but
all right.
I know that people take the statistics for the MBTI based off of that one really popular study that goes around. It's like
CAPT.
Was it from Kiersey or something?
Are you talking about Kiersey or the CAPT?
I think it was a Kiersey study that a lot of people seem to base their suggestions on in the forums, in videos, and I went and looked at the original statistics, and then I contacted David Kiersey's son himself, asking him about them and where he derived the data from, because I was really skeptical of the percentages. And it turns out he actually assumed those numbers. He didn't do hardcore, legit statistics. He just kind of did an assessment based on a cross-sectional study of a high school classroom, which, in my opinion, isn't really a valid source of information to extract such a broad statistic from.
Yeah.
So it's just beginning to prove more and more from what I'm seeing from my environment that what people think is the common type statistic is not actually what's realistically happening. So I want to know your perspective on that. What do you think about the percentages? Do you see that proving itself true in your environment?
Well, it's kind of hard to tell because usually. Well, actually, I actually don't go around typing every person I run across. I'll just go if I see a person exhibiting stereotypical type traits, it'll get my attention, and I'll go, oh, I wonder what type that person is, and then I'll start to pay attention. Or if it's a small group of people, say my college roommates in my last year of college. I lived with 4 other guys, and so I've taken the time to try to type them, and I keep changing my opinion because it was so long ago, and there's so many different things I knew about those guys. Yeah, there's still a lot of people in my regular life that I just have not bothered to type yet. So I don't really have statistics for people in my life. If I think of INFJs I know, which are supposedly the most rare type, that gets my attention. So I'll think, oh yeah, I know a few INFJs, but I don't know how many other INFJs. Same thing with with ESTPs, ESFJs. I can name a few people, probably from each type, but still, it's there's so many other people that I come in contact with on a daily basis that whose types I just don't know.
That's true.
Um, uh, and
I kind of have a problem where I can't stop thinking about it. So I try to type everybody in my environment. It's really bad. I can't like really watch a movie or do anything without thinking or just noticing some pattern or trend or like being like ESTP or just like it's constantly something processing in my mind. And so like I guess I pay like maybe excessive attention to it. But
mm,
do you ever see ENTPs or ESTPs in your life like at all? Do you know of any in your own life? Because they seem to be actually one of the rarer types than even INFJs.
yeah, I cannot think of. I can think of actually one of my college roommates. I thought was an ENTP for the longest time. I'm actually now thinking he might have been an ENFP. I'm still going back and forth on that, so I haven't solidified that yet, and I actually haven't talked to him in a long time. So, and then I do know a guy that I'm pretty sure, like maybe 80% sure, is an ESTP. It was a guy. It was one of my coworkers from many years ago. Um, he typed himself as ISTJ on one of those stupid online tests. I do not buy that at all. I'm pretty sure he's an extrovert, and I'm pretty sure he's a perceiver. A lot of ESTP descriptions fit him really well. So yeah,
The tests aren't really accurate anyway. It's they
yeah,
if you don't know the context of the questions they're asking, you're not going to get an accurate result, really.
yeah. Oh yeah, I know all about that. I've typed from everything like, well, I've always gotten introvert. I've always gotten the I and the T, but I've tested like ISTJ, INTJ. Um, I don't think I've ever tested INTP, but I have suspected INTP at one point. Um,
How did you figure out your type?
um, well, actually, it's kind of funny. So like I was at one point I thought I was an ISTJ just because that was like my most recent test results. I think it was the human metrics test, um, and which is like really biased towards J answers. I mean, they just they basically if you have judger like values, if you grew up with the J type values, you'll test J. Um, and so I just I didn't know anything about MBTI. Just all I knew were like there were these few tests online, and I just assumed, well, this test says I'm an ISTJ. So I went on YouTube and I like started looking for ISTJ related stuff, or to look for ISTJs. I came across Pneumoceptor's video from like almost like a couple of years ago, where it was called Ode to the ISTJ, where she was talking about her ISTJ close friend, and she was describing this friend, and it sounded nothing like me. um, it sounded like the type of person that I think my mom wishes I was, like the really responsible and organized and gets things done on time, and like really scheduled, and like helps other people stay on track. And that's I struggle just to keep myself on track of things. And my home is almost a mess, and as you can probably see in the background. um, so that was actually the video that got me kind of suspicious, like, or it got me curious, like, am I really an ISTJ? And if I'm not, then how do I find out? So that's when I did some more research. I joined Personality Cafe, went on to the What's My Type thread. Um, People there went back and forth between ISTJ and ISTP, and what I found was that the people who were arguing for ISTP were making more sense. Like they seemed to actually be paying attention to what I was saying, and um, their arguments just made sense, that as far as like who I am, and they kind of taught me what the functions were, and I identified more with with TI more so than TE. um, and then I kind of settled on ISTP, and I wasn't entirely sure yet. And then I went and I found interpersonality, and I started interacting with Danielle, and she kind of just like watched a few of my videos, and like she was actually convinced that I was an ISTP. And then she directed me to the interpersonality online course, and I just kind of went through that, and I was like, oh yeah, that even confirmed even more that I was an ISTP. And um, then I did like this Skype interaction with Danielle, and she kind of confirmed for me then that I was like officially, according to interpersonality, that I was an ISTP. And so everything from there just made sense from everything I learned from that point on with with the functions and like why I didn't relate to certain ISTP stereotypes, like and ways that I use my SE and I learned things about like the John Beebe model with like the child function and the inferior function and like even those made sense even though a lot of people don't agree with those theories. A lot of that I could see a lot of that in myself, like how I use NI as a child function just to kind of like goof around with and just like have fun theorizing about things that don't really matter in real life just because I don't trust my own intuition that much. Um, so yeah, just everything from that point on just made sense, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm definitely an ISTP now. And ever since then, even on the most of the online tests, I still get ISTP, except human metrics. That one still says I'm an ISTJ.
You know
But
what that might be? I notice there's a lot of like issues in the forums with people typing themselves between INTP and INTJ or ISTP and ISTJ. And I think it's because they don't think about the difference between judging and perceiving dominance and how it affects introverts. Because an introvert and a J will be perceiving dominant, and because they're perceiving dominant, they might have P traits where they kind of are aloof half of the time. And IPs, they have judging dominance, so they're more likely to be a little bit more controlled half of the time, despite them having NE or SE and being more aloof and disorganized or whatever. So it's like
yeah.
with introverts, it's always half and half. So it's like harder for them to type themselves, it seems sometimes.
I've heard that theory, and I can see that because like when I present myself online, um, I'll present like a lot of what my TI comes up with. My TI is processing information, and then it's all in my head until I communicate it, and then it sounds like I'm making judgments. So, um, so that's kind of like that's basically what TI does. It processes stuff and then forms conclusions based on that.
Mm.
But like if you're just to if you were to see me process information in real time, I'd be like taking the time to like to think about stuff and not want to jump to a decision or a conclusion right away. So um, so yeah, I can definitely see how I can come across as a judger, or how I might view myself as a judger. Um, I'm basically organized in my head.
That's my best friend's an ISTP, and she's like that, where she's pretty like laid back most of the time, and she's kind of bad with like time and specific things like that, and sometimes she'll just show up out of nowhere and just come say hi. But when it comes to like thinking about something like that or analyzing something, she's very thorough, and she can come across as like a J. And when she has like a goal or something that she's interested in, she pursues it like a J would. She's very adamant about it and very organized, almost like she has to make this thing happen, and so she'll
Mhm.
go for it with that kind of ambition of judging dominance.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I work too. Like I'll take a while to make a decision, but when I do, once I've made a decision, I'll stick to it. Like I've already thought this through, and it's kind of hard for me to for somebody else to try to change that, change my mind about that. Um, so how about you? I mean, do you relate to that, like being a perceiving dominant, and
Oh, I'm easier because I'm an extrovert. I'm definitely doubly like judging because I'm not only judging dominant, but then I use SI
yeah,
instead of SE or NE. So I mean,
when
I'm
you say
not really
perceiving
a,
dominant, I don't feel.
you
I
were
say
thinking
that.
you were thinking judging dominant, I know. um, but I get annoyed whenever I see people say something like ESFJs are really controlling because stereotypically they are. Maybe if they're really imbalanced people, they are. If they're relying too much on FE, but I am not really a controlling person. I tend to control my own environment. I'm pretty lazy. My room is kind of gross right now. It's finals week. I mean, like when it comes to organization, I keep everything organized in my head, just like you said. I have like all the time allotted carefully in my head. I know what's happening. I know I'm in control of everything. But because I'm in control of everything, I'm lazy with it because I know I can always pull something out of my butt later and get away with doing something at a different time. Like I'm the worst procrastinator. I don't like forcing my values upon other people. I try not to do that because I think that's annoying in the first place. I mean, all of these things people are ready to say about me, and they don't even know me, and it's really annoying because they're associating it with an idea of a type, and it's just like I'm good at keeping myself in control in any situation I handle, but for the most part, I'm just an easygoing person, so it's like any signs of being controlling get me tagged as some like neurotic control freak, and it's kind of annoying. But
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the stereotypes when people talk about SJs being controlling, it sounds like they're mostly talking about authority figures or older SJs, and
yeah,
yeah, because like I mean every I mean if you're familiar with my Dear ESFJ series, and
yes.
every ESFJ that I talk about in that is like either my age or older. Um, And so I have not actually interacted with that many, with that many younger ESFJs. So,
Ironically, I used to be a really controlling person.
okay.
I was, and I think I'd attribute it either to imbalance or the continuation of imbalance. So, like older SJs, they never necessarily broke themselves out of that mindset that
Hmm.
they had, the strong EJ mindset. And because of it, they just continue to go on that path and become more and more rigid the more their methods proved right, which is probably SI. But personally, I used to be that way from an early age. In high school, I was probably a really insufferable person. I wouldn't want to know me. But I think it was being that way and becoming more self-aware and conscious that I kind of like plummeted towards the other end of more like introversion and less. I don't know. I became kind of just the opposite of exactly how I was,
Hmm.
which I also think is kind of necessary for people to become really like conscious, is to explore both ends of themselves. But I don't know. I really hope I don't become that way when I'm older, but I also don't see myself becoming that way because it's not something that controls me anymore like it used to.
Well, was there something specific that prompted that change?
I think it was mostly just learning about the MBTI and learning about myself and understanding what I did and the way I was. But I think an even bigger part of it was a lot of the ESFJ hate, which I'm really thankful for, ironically,
Oh
because
wow.
a lot of it made me extremely uncomfortable on the site and talking to people. I was really self-conscious about the way I was because everybody was like already hating on me, so I felt like I had like pressure like all around me to not be the way I was. So I tried not to be myself. And in doing that, I understood my own limits, and I understood that the things people were telling me I shouldn't have given credit to because I like basically acknowledge all parts of myself, regardless of just the behavior I had on the outside, my top two functions, but also my lower two functions. And in exploring INTPs a lot too, that has helped me immensely because I recognize that side of myself that's the weaker end. And in knowing many and talking to them, I learned that about myself. And I guess strengthened myself in that regard. And the more I learned about it, the less I read about the MBTI, the more I read about Jung, the more I understood how much of it had become socialized and just kind of like socially just destroyed by stereotypes and everyone's own perspectives, and it was just another accessory for people. They're not understanding the idea of cognition as a science as exactly what it is, as how you can't tell people they're less abstract or more concrete based on a set of letters. There's depth and shallowness in every person, and in recognizing all four sides of myself in that way, or whatever, how many sides, and in other people, it like kind of enlightened me from the whole like constraint of that whole system that I let control me for a while.
Hmm.
So if it wasn't for all of that negativity, I wouldn't have been questioning so much like why am I so crappy? Why am I this horrible person? Why am I giving them credit to tell me I'm this person? And because of it, I guess I kind of recognize all of that. Does that make sense? I'm sorry. I'm like
um,
rambling
yeah.
a little.
That's really interesting though. But I mean, so I mean, all that negative, all the ESFJ hate, like, I mean, how much of that? I mean, did you So you actually like sort of believed what they were saying at first, and then
Well, the thing
you
is
know.
that I emulate a lot of people with FE, so
Hmm.
I understand a lot of types of people that you could be, and I feel like they're all a part of me and a piece of me. So when people would tell me these negative things, I'd be like, well, I could see myself being that way, so it must be true, even though I wasn't actually realistically that way. So I
Hmm.
give too much merit to it just because I saw it as a viable possibility and not necessarily as something that it was. So it was too much of like me bettering myself like I was used to doing, to play it safe, to say, oh, let me recognize my flaws and make sure I do this, but it's too much to that extent. I shouldn't have to apologize to other people for being a certain type when half of what they're saying about me isn't true. I shouldn't have to apologize for my flaws when they have equal flaws as well. Why should I be sorry towards them? Why should I even listen to them? I don't have to. That's not fair to do to a person. So I recognize my flaws, but I don't think that people should consistently be able to point them out and make fun of them when they have an equal amount of flaws themselves, sometimes more.
Yeah.
So that was something that took me a long time to recognize for myself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, in the process, did you ever feel like you were kind of overcompensating for it, or like did you know
I
like
mean, like,
like try to go like try to behave against your natural inclinations?
oh, definitely. That was exactly what made me feel I tried to be exactly the opposite of anything
Hmm.
natural. Um, because I didn't want people to be right about me in any way. I didn't want them to
Okay.
look at me and say, "Oh, you have this one trait. Let me blow that up and turn it into something that justifies my opinion of you," which is still not fair. But in trying to avoid that, I tried to act like things that I wasn't. Um, like on the forums, I would type in a more seemingly rational way or try to avoid being even the slightest bit any sign of emotion or even playful so that people were forced to take me seriously because already I go in there with this preemptive expectation for me to be something unreliable, and so it's just like I post one thing and then I get a bunch of like people thinking that they have the right to step on me or tell me I'm wrong, and a lot of it was because I didn't know how to articulate myself to combat that. So I learned how to explain exactly what I think, and it makes it so much easier to communicate with people that way.
Hmm. Well, so then like what motivated you to like to stay on those forums if they were like treating you like that?
Because I was like, this is not fair. I will prove you wrong.
uh,
You cannot tell me I'm this way when I'm not. But ironically, I was letting them tell me I was that way. But yeah, it was
uh,
the desire to prove them wrong and to show them
uh,
that they can't discredit me as a person. And I succeeded for myself at least. So that's what's important.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, because I mean, I mean, the first time I watched I think your very first interaction was with Pneumoceptor, and
I was so nervous.
yeah, I remember, I know a few other people commented that that you did not seem like a typical ESFJ in that chat,
Yeah, they would tell me
and
I was an STJ, that I was clearly a thinker, or that I was an NFP, and I found it delightful because I was like, oh, that just goes to show how little you know about this type, because you can't even recognize it in any form of manifestation. So
yeah,
I'm not offended by the lack of knowledge anymore because that's exactly what it is, a lack of knowledge,
yeah.
and it's just perpetuated in cycles and repeated. So
Oh yeah, and I'm constantly getting told I don't seem like an ISTP. Or supposed ISTPs are telling me like you're not an ISTP.
why not? Or what are some stereotypes you face? That's what I want to know. I want to know every other type stereotype.
That we all own motorcycles. We're into extreme risky sports, and we fix cars, and um, yeah, it's just the whole like ISTP mechanic, and um, uh, yeah, and I think the reason I never got into any of that was just part of it was just being raised by my overly cautious ESFJ mom, who like just kind of steer me away from anything that she perceived as dangerous. So like it'd be like motorcycles are dangerous, or anything that's anything that has like any risk to it. Like even even something simple like there's like there's these hot air balloon rides in my area, and I showed my mom these these videos. I took took pictures of this hot air balloon. I was like I was thinking about going on one of these, and my mom's like, don't do it, it's dangerous. Even and this was like this past summer. I mean, it's not even when I was a kid. I was, but yeah, it's like that. I mean, that was like my whole life, and so that was kind of ingrained in me. Plus, I found like other activities that I enjoyed doing, and so it wasn't like a thing that was like constantly drawing me to to try out these dangerous activities. Um,
What are
so
what are some of those things you like doing?
mostly I do stuff online. Like I just like I like really enjoy these online chats. Um, and let's see, so I enjoy swing dancing, doing road trips, and seeing there's certain TV shows I'm into and certain movies. So there's plenty of stuff that that I enjoy doing that's doesn't involve like like anything like really high risk or physical. Um, and I think one of my theories as to like why a lot of ISTPs are known for being like like really athletic is because anyone who's an ISTP as a kid, if they have some physical abilities, athletic abilities, and they discover like, oh, if I throw the ball like this, I can make the ball go really far, and it's like that's like a really cool thing, and so they get they get really into it, and they go out for they enjoy sports, and so they become good at sports, and so they develop those athletic abilities. And since I didn't have those natural physical abilities, like I would throw a ball and it would go like 3 feet, and like I would just go like, okay, what was the point of that? And so I would just give up right away and go find something else to do. So like I never got into sports because of that, and so yeah, it's I think for SPs it's all about what we're all kind of like interest driven. Like anything that gets our interest, we'll just focus on that, and then we may find other interests along the way and lose interest in that other thing, and then and so that's why like when I talk with other SPs, whether I get whether I find a connection with them, it all depends on whether we have similar interests or not.
So do you think like SE is something that drives you to want to manipulate your external environment a lot? Or how would you describe it? Like, what kind of unconscious impulses does it give you? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that's what I've heard that that SE does, kind of like gives
Yeah,
SP.
but I want to know what else there is to it, because I feel
Um,
like that's all people talk about with SE is sensation and
well,
stimulation.
I can like an example in my own life is like one of the reasons I got into computers was like way back in like the early '80s, and kind of giving away my age here. Um, I first learned that if you write these simple lines of code, you can make a certain thing show up on the screen. And I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. And so like I learned that if I change this line of code, I can change make it do something different. And then eventually I learned how to do how to do graphics, and then that's kind of like what it was to me. Like I could control what what this program was doing. And then eventually tried stuff. I had like this animation software, and I could make miniature crude little animated movies with it. And to me that was just something I enjoyed doing, just like having that I could tell it to do something and then it would do it. And so that's kind of and that's actually why it's why I got into programming and went into computer science, and then when I tried to apply it to the real world, I found that it's like way more complex than that, and like most of programming that's done in the real world is not tangible. It's not a matter of you write these lines of code and you want to do something. It's just code that runs in the background that interfaces with other code, and that's kind of why I got drained by it, because it's like all like abstract theoretical stuff that intuitives are into. That's why you find a lot of INTPs and INTJs as software developers. Um, uh, and uh, and so like now what I do is I'm a software build engineer, and I actually take care of day-to-day troubleshooting. Like if there's a break in somebody else's code, at and it's the build system that's that's the issue, then it's my job to go in and troubleshoot and figure out what's the build system doing, and I can troubleshoot like tangible like real time problems. So I'm not having to deal with like these abstract theoretical I don't know if this will ever actually be used type of programming.
What are some kinds of things that make the most sense to you or don't? Like, has there ever been something that just things you've noticed that have just naturally seemed to just click with you? You don't have to think much about them, or vice versa? Is that too vague of a
Uh,
question?
kind of. Like, are you talking about like just like
Just in
in
general,
the
like maybe
in the
like
real
when you
world?
were a kid, or maybe even now, like if there are things you just find that you're drawn towards because they just seem to make sense.
Um, I used to be really into astronomy as a kid, which I'm not sure if it's something that either makes sense or doesn't make sense. Like I would memorize these facts about like the size of the planets relative to the size of the Earth, um, and it was actually hard for me to picture. Like I would learn like how far like each of the planets were from the sun, how far they were from each other, and like the how long it would take each planet to revolve around the sun. And it was hard for me to like picture that in my mind until I saw like diagrams, you know, diagrams which were certainly not to scale because they can't you can't have scale diagrams of the solar system and still be able to see it, but but yeah, I mean that kind of helped me to actually to see like if I can see like you know uh, these representations of the planet's sizes. Like okay, this is what if Jupiter was this big, Earth would be this big, and the Sun would be off the page or whatever. Um, at least I could take bits of that and try to make sense of it. And so like if I have like small details, I can try to piece together like something I know, even if I can't like visually picture it. I can understand like what these facts are implying.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of what it's always been, just like taking facts here and there and piecing together like just general knowledge about that topic.
Sounds a lot like TI.
Yeah.
I was just curious.